Now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Hello, my name is Gleb. I'm going to be hosting today, or attempting to. I'm glad we have a full hall of people. Now, I love the panels here. So far, we had two contentious panels debating a lot of questions. Now, this is going to be interesting. Now, we will have Melanie Boylan, now if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, from Irish Tech News. She's a very experienced journalist. And at the same time, she's a sci-fi nut. So she's also into Game of Thrones and all that stuff. As in social media, sci-fi, that's her game. She's going to be talking to 3 venture firm representatives and 1 Nordic Business Angels Network dude. Now, this is going to be very interesting. They're going to talk about 2 things, smart money and dumb money. As in, what is it, and when do you decide which one do you take? They're also going to talk about a little bit of impact investing. Now, on this kind note, I would like to welcome our panelists on stage. Zaya, Stephane, Hussein, Mikko, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and finally, Stephane Boel. Please, warm hand of applause for these fine people.
Interesting. Hi, everyone. Well, thank you for the introduction. Quite apt as well. I am a bit of a social media nerd and sci-fi nut. But I'm also a writer at Irish Tech News. And for some insane reason, they thought that was a good enough reason to have me here. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us at the very first panel this morning. We really appreciate you getting here nice and early for us. And as Gleb was explaining, we have quite an interesting panel today. We have Zaya. She's an early stage investor with EBRD, Venture Capital. And I've been looking at their Twitter profiles just to do a bit of, research. And I have to say, it's given me a bit of an eyeful on certain areas of their lives. So Zaya, you joined in May last year on Twitter. What made you join last year? Is it on?
Yeah. So coincidentally, I joined EBRD's venture capital arm,
at the same
my
time?
current job, in May of last year. So that prompted me opening the Twitter account.
Was it part of your contract?
No, it was
I just got to ask.
my own initiative.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have Stephane. We had a great time in the speakers' lounge. Was it Stephane, Stephanie, Stephane? So we went through quite a range of names. And you're also an early stage investor with LAUNCHub. I saw you retweeted the SpaceX launch. Did you watch it?
Not really. We just retweeting dumply.
And so you were just...
It's basically maybe similar to Zaya. I mean, when I joined my VC firm, somebody told me you have to have a Twitter account. So I'm just tweeting.
Oh, fair enough.
But I'm more active on other social media actually, mainly for Facebook and LinkedIn. So there I post more intelligent things, I guess.
And then we have Hussein Kanji. And you are no less than a blue tick on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't think that means anything. That just means you know some people.
You've got something on them, obviously.
No, I know a lot of the exec team at Twitter, so they gave it to me a long time ago.
I need to talk to you about getting me a tick.
Easily done.
Oh, good man. And your Twitter profile is build more tech, eat more cake. What's that about, Hussein?
So I am an accidental investor and owner of a chain of bakeries in London that produce award-winning cakes and have the best afternoon tea in London.
Well, there you go.
That's
See,
my
I told you.
advertisement.
Quite revealing looking at people's Twitter bios. And sorry, you're...
Are you making your business meetings in your bakeries or
If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see I check in at the bakery every once in a while. They say cake is really good for breakfast.
Okay.
Science.
I'll go along with that. I didn't mention you're also a co-founder of Hoxton Ventures, and you're based in London. And then, last but not least, we have Claes, Miko, and your Twitter profile is pretty intense, I've got to say. There's a lot of detail in there. You're the co-founder of Fiband.org. You're a steering board member of Rising North Fund and the managing director of Nordic Business Angel Network.
Is this the smart and dumb question already? But yes, that's correct. Yeah. Good stalking, excellent. So yes, that's Twitter, and I'm happy to be a tweet believer. So is it Twitter or something?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
You're just a tweeter. Do you actually get any time to enjoy things like eat cake or?
Sometimes, but like Arnold Schwarzenegger says, you just have to sleep faster. And so I woke this morning 3 a.m. and I heard these guys watching on Twitter and Messenger like where is everybody? So I woke up the same time as these guys were. I'm not sure if you had any sleep this night. So good. We call it in Finland deep due diligence.
Deep due diligence.
Yes. So well done. So I'm a little lagging behind. So I'm going to catch up the Finnish sauna, which also known as Finnish Exit.
Sounds right as well. Well, I just thought I'd give you a brief introduction to our speakers. Now, we did discuss briefly by email what we were going to go through, but as Claes was saying, it's definitely about what is smart money versus dumb money. Zaya, why don't you start us off? What do you believe smart money and dumb money is?
Well, yeah, I think that this, when I was thinking about, before joining this panel, whether I'm the representative of smart or dumb money. But I mean, there is such thing as, I think whoever your investor is makes a huge difference. So, because you'll be with these people for the next 5 years, and whether or not they will be adding any value to your company, and how, your relationship will evolve over time. So, or is it going to be someone completely hands-off, so just giving you the money and, you'll never see this person again, which in some cases I think works well, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I would say this is probably typically what we would call, dumb money. So like a very passive investor who doesn't really do quote-unquote value add, right, to the company or the entrepreneur. In some cases, I think we're going to talk about it. In some cases, that's perfectly fine. But I think, especially for early stage companies, it's quite important. If your investor is experienced in your vertical or in your business, if they've done, if they've invested into similar successful companies elsewhere, if they can really sort of help you and guide you. This is especially true, I think, for early, like seed, maybe Series A stages.
Yeah. Because there are 5 stages, aren't there? And one thing I did notice actually from all of your profiles is you're all early stage. What is wrong with the rest of the other stages? Are they just dull, boring, or why all early stage?
I think that definitely early stage is more exciting than late stage, but it's also more challenging. So there is really way more things that investors have to work with the companies and help them on various things.
It's greater
I
risk,
think that there
isn't
is when talking about smart and dumb money, there is the right investor for each round and each stage. So it's just that I can give you an example of a company that we're like a very, very early investor. It's a Bulgarian founder in Silicon Valley. We were like seed and pre-seed. Back then we were adding some value, but nowadays we don't really need to be involved so much because nowadays the guys, they have some other amazing VCs that invested afterwards, like Liner Perkins and a bunch of other guys on the B and C rounds. So in each round, the investors will actually give something specific that is the right thing to contribute in the given round.
So what would you think was dumb versus smart money as well? We'll get back to that question.
I think that dumb money in general is government money, unfortunately.
It's like half of Europe.
Yeah, by the way,
Who
our
are your
fund also has
LPs
some
again?
government money.
It's just 36%, not half, just 36%.
But in general, I'm saying this because there are a lot of attempts in some cases by local governments to kind of artificially create funds. They do tenders. On those tenders, a bunch of guys appear and say, okay, we want to be the fund managers, and sometimes you have people without that much of experience that end up, operating a fund for the first time in their lives. So I would definitely, in the same time, this is the way to start things in an ecosystem. Like, so in Central Eastern Europe, there been, funds like that. So, in some cases, local entrepreneurs, they don't really have that much of other options, but there will be, I would advise that they still have to be very careful, about the profile of the investor they're talking to. Is it like somebody that just, got some money from a local government or from a European organization without really having an experience investing or an experience of being an entrepreneur?
Yeah. And Hussein, can you add any more to that?
So I generally think most venture money is dumb money to begin with. We don't know how to build these companies. If we did, we'd be building them ourselves. So we write checks to people who are a lot smarter than we are, who then go on to do great things. There's dumb money, which is, I think, probably not so bad. And then there's really dumb money, which unfortunately there's too much of. And the really dumb money is people who then try and interfere in the business, often with the best of intentions.
Oh, yeah.
But they screw things up. We've seen this time and time again in all kinds of scenarios where people don't have the same long-term view, where people want to optimize for the short term, where people don't want to spend money. This is investors, and all of these things can kill companies or kill growth in the companies.
Yeah.
So I think you have to pick your money reasonably carefully. The really, really, really smart money, which tends predominantly to be in California, are folks who can do a lot of things behind the scenes and just make things a lot easier for a company. They may not add that much direct value, but they just open up a bunch of doors behind the scenes.
So would that be like founder-friendly kind of thing?
I think founder-friendly these days is, and it gets used a lot, it basically just means passive, right? The most founder-friendly thing is you write a check to someone and then disappear.
Yeah.
And maybe when they need to call you, they call you. But I think there are a bunch of investors who actively work behind the scenes to open up doors. Like, for instance, I have a blue check on Twitter. That's not because I'm any good. That's just because I know someone behind the scenes, and I can get myself a blue check. If one of my founders wanted to do the same thing, it's not that hard for me to be able to do the same thing for them. You can go through the formal channel, or you can go through the informal channel.
Yeah.
So the best smart money is probably the guys who can work the informal channel really effectively.
Yeah. And Claes, Miko?
Yeah, just as a comment, I think it's really crucial timing for the question dumb versus smart, because it's just increasing the amount of capital in for the early stage. The corporations, the governments, they all found the startup level. It's the hype and the whole package. So it's a good question. It all comes down for the entrepreneurs, what kind of growth support they need. So capital, I would say there is, at least for the seed level, it's very well represented. And it's just the challenge is now, especially when representing angels, and what kind of profile are those? They are lucky to have less and less angels who screw up that cap table, take majority in the early stage, and are really like bad angels. So actually understanding how to build that process. So what we see now, and especially when we're educating and training the investor category, not just entrepreneurs, is how to invest, and then again how to use their skills. And I would say that now when we have the ICOs and matching funding from the government and that passive money, so it's more for the investors to actually start selling themselves. It's more and more the business for the entrepreneurs. They can choose, they can do the due diligence of the investors, which is really crucial. So picking up that perfect match, it's all about the team of the entrepreneurs, but also what kind of a matching investor you get with that growth resource. It can, in worst case, and we hear it a lot, especially with angels, that you get stuck, the dynamics doesn't work, and I guess most of the case, it's not so much the business doesn't work, it's just the team hasn't been able to adapt and modify whatever solution they have to offer. That's the job of the so-called investors. The investment can be also sweat equity in form of just brains and growing. And that's why we have a huge job in catching up with the giving back ecosystem, which is, of course, the Silicon Valley. Most likely we're never going to reach that, but it's a great benchmark. But we're getting there. And now it's just for the entrepreneurs to have more information, what kind of investors to have on board. VCs can be hugely valuable and just building to the next level. Angels as well, just passing that value of death. But the best case, of course, is the entrepreneur is so smart they don't need any investor. If they just need the growth resource, then in theory, that's available, and they can keep the 100% ownership as well. You don't need that investor necessary. So,
I mean, that would be the hope, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess that would be the ideal, but as the ecosystem doesn't work for the 100% ownership yet, so that's why we have these excellent experts with that experience, but they cannot be jerks and just massive loads of capital owners. They cannot just ride on that being wealthy and I'll give you that investment. But then again, with money you can do a lot of help. For example, being from Finland, we see a lot of these, any kind of solutions. And if it's like a food delivery app, then what is the chance that you have this awesome solution, but then again, a Silicon Valley competitor can just pump in that funding for 2 years' time and just compete you out. So what kind of smartness will you need to actually gain those goals, whatever they are?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo that point because I think more than ever before, entrepreneurs, especially at early stages, have a lot of options in terms of raising money and who they would raise money from. So this is particularly true with initial coin offerings. So that you could argue that that's sort of like the dumbest money that you could find, because these are your retail individual investors that probably would not always, but they wouldn't really know about the business, etc. They wouldn't get involved. But then you raise the money a lot faster than with the VC process, etc. So I think this question, because of this availability of different ways to raise money, and the question is, just in addition to capital, what else do you need from your investors?
That's a really good point, actually, because the other areas of venture capital isn't just money. It's mentorship, it's services, it's office space. There's so much more than just money when it comes to venture capital. It's a value add at the end of the day.
Maybe as like what we see from the VCs, they really have to build a profile. Like if you join our team, where you get the funding, but you also get this package when you, for example, you log in and you get all this ready-made material. They make sure that the VCs are team players, those coaches making those different teams play with each other and just trying to, it's not just finding that super unicorn potential, it's somehow also building that team or how they can build synergies within that portfolio as well. So this is the best time that this is definitely going to disrupt the investor side. Less jerk investors, and they really have to be smart who offer it back and help in building. So there has to be more investors who have that entrepreneurial background, have been there, make their hands dirty with the entrepreneur. So no free riders who just can, we all see in the social network film and the new generation of entrepreneurs, they know that they can prepare themselves, that no free riders, they actually have to create value. So the big bucks, of course, that's in the upper level, the C and D rounds, and I'm not sure what's the smartness there. Then it's a different kind of a smartness, but the early stage, of course, that's the crucial part.
I would add something. It's really important, I think, for entrepreneurs when they talk to a fund to actually look at the portfolio companies of this fund, and actually they can see if they can have some value by just being a part of a family of other entrepreneurs, because all the investors have to do, and I'm not saying we're doing it perfectly well, our fund, but we're trying. It's really to make more exchanges and knowledge sharing between the founders themselves and between the portfolio companies. And so this is also a way to be, to smarter as an investor.
One thing I would like to give to the people who are sitting here today is a bit of a checklist for venture capital. So if you could just have a quick think of what you might want to put as a checklist, and hopefully by the time I get down to you, Claes, they haven't mentioned the 2 or 3 that you want to say. So, Zaya.
Well, I'm angel level, so these are VCs.
Well, this
I
is
got
true.
a bunch of stuff, so keep it coming.
Yeah, I would start with looking over their portfolio and looking at the experience that they've had, what kind of companies that they've invested in, whether they've invested in your vertical or your business model, and whether this is a successful investor. You know, whether they've invested successfully. And then you can take it one step further, and you can actually do some reference calls with the investee companies, and talk to them about what it's like to work with this investor.
Okay, so background research and history. Stephane?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I'm talking to startups, you know, quite a few times I was asked about, you know, what do you guys provide on top of the funding. So there are some entrepreneurs that are like, you know, asking you directly this question, and usually the answer that I give is, you know, here's like a bunch of names. These are our founders. You know, just go and talk to them, and I'm happy to do the connection.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So one other thing is that a lot of entrepreneurs are not doing their research properly. They, you know, the fact that you go to a conference and you see a bunch of investors and VCs on the speakers or an investors list, and you just start to talk to them, this is not good enough. I mean, you have to see, you know, is this investor like an active or a passive right now? Because VCs, they have stages.
Yeah.
You know, every VC also fundraises. So it's important for founders to understand that we also do fundraising ourselves, and it takes a while, sometimes even longer than for a startup itself. So, you know, first thing to check is this fund actually investing actively right now, or they're fundraising, or they're like passive in a way that they already invested, they still have money, but they keep this money only for the existing portfolio.
Yeah.
So this would be like checklist number 1. Checklist number 2 would be, are those guys investing in that specific geography? Because, you know, Max actually, he was in Sofia a few months ago, and he gave a talk, and you said something interesting, like the first checks are like traveling less than 50 kilometers or something like that. So, I mean, usually you will find your first investors really close to you. So,
Due diligence both ways is essential.
Yeah.
You know, it's very important that you do your due diligence so that you know what your risk is. But it's as important that the startup or founder also checks up on the VC as well. So, yeah, very good points. Hussein?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest tip is what Zaya said, which is you should do references, and you call down the companies, you call down the good ones, because you'll hear about how they added value, and you call down all the bad ones, the bad companies, the ones that failed, to find out how the investor behaves in the more stressful situations. And that will give you the best portrait of how the investor actually thinks about life. And then if you're socially connected enough, you call down the follow-on investors. So if you're an early stage firm, you call down the middle stage or the later stage firms, and you find out how they feel about that investor and about that firm, because they're the inheritors, right? They're the next round, and they will usually have a view on who's a good player and who's not a good player.
Right.
You know, in a small market like in California, where everything is geographically close and everyone is fairly socially connected, it's really easy to do that. When you start going across Europe and you're investing across countries, it's hard to hear the gossip and the real information. The information just doesn't travel as well. So you have to do a bunch of phone calls and I think some extra special work. But then at the end of the day, if you only have one check on the table, you know, sometimes unfortunately you have to take the check, right? So money does matter as well.
Yeah.
Good points, excellent. So as these were like more the, let's say the institutional, when you reach that VC level, it's expected that there is a team and there's a startup and you reach a certain level and you're seeking like 100,000 plus in euros. Let's take it simplified. But so I guess they're for entrepreneurs from the VC point of view as well, that you are looking for investments from somebody who does that as a profession, investing other people's money most likely, and then again you have to be sure that you get an active and a good representative from that VC company, that your contact person is your team member as well, so you don't get a passive, because the risk is you get a hired person who has no experience for entrepreneurship in worst case, and that we can call passive in one sense. Of course, so it's important to know what kind of a team member from that good name of VC, for example, you get. But when you go to a little earlier phase, the angels who in medium, they invest 20,000 euros per round per angel, at least in the Nordics, it's quite small tickets. So what is important that we don't have a definition in Europe what is a business angel. Anybody can call themselves a business angel, and so it's not mentoring, it's not philanthropic, voluntary job, but it's absolutely not consultation. It's not consultation that, because you're not paying for that service in that sense. So you're actually getting an investor. If you're looking for a consultant, then you're looking for a consultant. But it has to be fair that the entrepreneur understands that you're actually looking for an investor who gets equity ownership in that company in exchange for knowledge and eventually some capital as well to get to the next phase. So you have that, like, first of all, knowing that you actually have a right investor. And the second part, of course, the same, that you have enough information about this person, because most likely 90% of all the investments on angel level in the Nordics are made as a group. So not just one person, it's a group of people, typically 4 to 5. It can be even cross-border outside your own country. So how do you maintain that lead investor who represents, so you don't have too many chefs in that soup, so you have one voice, and that's the one you're building that company with from the ownership perspective. So but you have the support from the rest of that group. So once again, that's the problem for the lead investor. How does is that person able to create that perfect match of investors, not just free riders in that sense, and just building that 100K, 200K early stage investment. So once again, that's part of the discussion the entrepreneur has to make, and skillful entrepreneurs have the perspective that they scan out, do the due diligence of that investor, ask, is this a good person or not? What's the background? Has there been screw-ups before? And this is the perfect time to, once again, there are more and more information available and less possibilities for those passive free riders.
So did everybody write down that checklist?
I would actually add one more thing. To
Go
that.
for it.
So I think often, especially with like bigger VCs, you'll be interacting, during the due diligence and before the investment with the whole team. But I would try to understand who would ultimately be on your board, right? If it's going to be like one of the partners, and who exactly is it going to be? Because this is the person that you're going to be seeing on a regular basis for the next 5 years or more. So it's quite important that you actually feel comfortable having this person on your board, that you could have a relationship with this person, a reasonable, professional, mutually understandable relationship, and this person is not going to, interfere too much, or, basically, it's quite important to know who ultimately is going to be there.
Yeah, no, I've got to say, when you're in the deal room or at a meeting here, it's great that you can bond over shared common interests, and you've both made it here, and you both like Game of Thrones and Walking Dead, and you thought the food at the cafe was fantastic, but you've really got to think long tail. And you've really got to think 5 years in advance. Are you still going to be, talking to this person, let alone investing with them?
Can I add as well as one from one of the leading angels we have in the Nordics? He has one of his motivations for investing, because angel invest in two simplified things. That's the team and scalable. So these two simple things, if you have in order, you might very well get an investment. But this person has a saying that if he has a team that he likes so much that he's able to spend 2 hours a day for 8 years stuck in an elevator, then he's ready to make that investment. But that same goes to that entrepreneur, as you just said, that you're actually looking for that team member, especially in that early phase. So if you don't get that vibes correctly, that you actually like that person, or there's something, then you should just drop it. In most cases, it won't get much better, because when things are okay, you don't. So this kind of stress test or whatever that should be, typically VC tested it out that they listens to what the entrepreneur says from the first meeting, and after 3 months they ask it again, and have they fulfilled those, for example, promises they made. So that's stress test level. So also the entrepreneur should make something out of that investor. Hopefully the situation is that the entrepreneur gets to pick who the investor will be. But in most cases, the investor, it's not like you make a cold meeting and you make an agreement and sign it. It's more like a friendship that's continuing and being built. That's at least what we see back home in the Nordics, that it's a relationship game. And of course, when you're not pitching, that's the best pitch. You're just bonding, doing that 4 a.m. mingling with that glass of wine or whatever, and you're actually getting deep shit for whatever you like. So that's the key and a secret sauce, I would say, in many cases.
We're all sniggering here because he was up until 4 a.m. So.
He was the only one working that far. So.
Yes, working. I was wondering if there were any questions at all. If there are any questions at all at the moment. Go for it.
Hussein had a point regarding look up how did the investor behave when things went down. Now, question for all of you. Now, I don't know if you've been a professional investor specifically, but you're managing a lot of investors with Nordic Band. But specifically, how many belly ups or post-mortems do you publicly publish, as in cases where things went down, and make it available for anybody who's looking you up online? So all the cases you've invested into, your firm has invested into, how many of those cases do you actually make available so people can find out who you guys are or speak publicly maybe on stage? Did I make myself clear, by the way?
Yeah, so how many zeros or how many bad scenarios have we written about? We haven't written about anything, good or bad. So, we don't have the positives and we don't have the negatives. But all the companies are on our website, including the ones that went belly up. It's not that hard to figure out. And a bunch of our founders have tracked down founders where we've had major disagreements with the founders, usually in these stressful situations. In one case, we actively bankrupted a company and restarted it from scratch, and rightfully so. I think the founder is probably not one of our friends, but if you call him and ask him the situation, and then you ask us the situation, I think it's fairly easy to piece together. You can. There's nuance. There's no right or wrong in these things, but you can piece together what kind of happened without that much effort. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. We have one write-off so far. Our fund is only less than 5 years old, and I'm trying to think if it's available on the website. I don't think so, but I think you can. I mean, if somebody asked, we could we could easily share that information.
Anyone else?
We have our first fund was actually a micro-seed fund. So it was a 10 million fund where we invested in 60 companies. So you can imagine that out of those 60, there was a lot of
That's a lot.
I think around half of the companies actually didn't make it, but that's normal. I mean, we don't have them on the website because those guys are just no longer doing those companies. But what it's important also to say is that some of those people are actually still involved with us and with the fund. One of the guys is actually now kind of a associate, even if he doesn't have officially the title. He's really involved and helps a lot in the fund. Another guy just went from his startup to one of our other companies that we invested in. So there is also a lot of...
So a bit of osmosis, is there? Yeah. Sort of moving from one fund to another. Okay. Yeah.
I guess it's a little tricky on the angel level. It's so much more personal. So actually, that's a good point. And those professional angels really... like those on angel list and are very visible, and invest massively with the representing as a lead the massive group, then it's much easier to follow those. And of course, Crunchbase lists all your portfolio, and you can easily track what has gone wrong. But actually, I don't know that angels have actively been sharing stories on their website, what we're wrong. We have, of course, the fail day and fuck up nights and those, and it's more and more in the angel level as well sharing, but it's more like within the investor community. It's more acceptable that you share the story that actually went wrong somehow. But it's typically the main message is almost always the fact that they fail with the due diligence of the team, and they just couldn't build up relations that lasted that stressful moment. And it's probably something you can't always even figure out in advance. Of course, so many elements there are affecting that. How is that investment going to go? But from the topic like dumb versus smart, so I guess it's once again we're coming back to the fact that there should be more information. It would be fair for the ecosystem. Also, angel level, there would be more information available. And yes, even about those failures. At least we have one of those leading angels we have in the Nordics. He's a pro. He listed those 20 investments he's made, and those who failed, those are what's the topic? It's called experiences, or with the lessons learned was the topic. So lessons learned. So there are 4 companies that failed totally. So it's more in the positive culture as well.
So I suppose part of the due diligence of everybody here is to make sure they look up these fail days and fuck up nights and get there, find out how people failed, why they failed. And I'm sure as VCs and an angel that you would have seen this slowly happening, or maybe fast happening, and sometimes you just can't help the founder in time to support it.
In general, when you're in a stressful situation, there are people who can make things even more stressful, and there are people who can try and take some of the stress out. They're probably not going to be able to take the stress out because they're not the cause of the stress, and it's important to know that. And a bunch of our businesses have gone through ups and downs before they become really big, and so what happens on the up is you kind of don't have to do very much, right? It just kind of happens. But what happens in the down and how you behave in those situations can make all the difference in the world, especially to the founder who's running it, it's kind of a lonely, solitary job, right? Being the person who's trying to navigate something through troubled waters. And if your investors are panicking while you're in that situation, it's just really, really, really hard to be a captain.
Yeah, that's not going to help, is it? Are there any other questions? Any questions?
I would happy to hear comments or questions as well. Meanwhile, we're waiting, I would like to just bring out one part which hasn't been really discussed yet, the crowdfunding part. And if you could just quickly take that, because what's interesting in London, and what I would assume you see quite a lot as well, because in the UK, it's more like crowdfunding is very much used by the angels on the level. It's more like the teams bring on a smart money element, an angel, to support that, and the crowdfunding comes after that smart money is implemented. So it's more like a marketing tool and additional passive funding, because you have in UK, you have the deduction model in taxes, you can get the lawyers and doctors to invest, but they're not startup experts, but you can get that money flowing. The same goes with the governmental part, that they're, at least in Finland, the so-called dumb money, it's more matching money. So nowadays, we don't have the culture anymore. It changed quite, in the last 5 years, it changed that the government doesn't make the primary decision which company gets the investment or not. So they changed the model so that the government only matches the private initiatives. So if an angel group or a VC group comes in, so the government matches those. That's not the case in Sweden, for example. That is, Alma Invest is investing primarily and doing that first investment. So it's very interesting seeing the balance where smart and taxpayer smart and wherever that line goes. But I guess once again, something to remind the entrepreneurs that if you're thinking about those platforms, so just make sure you have that skill in your team. Is it board consultation or even an owner and a former investor at some level? And I guess we're going to see the future trend as well, partly that the VCs, at least what I understood, are also start using more and more of these investment platforms in the form of gathering that they are the expertise team and with the tools to gather the additional investment.
Well, thank you so much, Claes, Mikko. That was actually incredibly impressive information just came out from that last few sentences. I hope you found...
I surprised myself. I guess I quoted somebody.
It must, that 4 o'clock end of your day must have helped. I hope you've found our panel of interest today. Thank you again so much for coming along this morning and watching us. If you have any questions, they will be available after the panel if you have anything you want to ask them one-to-one. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.